So I'm going to go ahead and go over the homework you have today. I'm going to do that. Well, first I'm going to just delete what I had already wrote for the above class so I can rewrite it for you guys so you guys can get the full benefit of it. So this is, unfortunately, I can't give you an exciting, it's a bit hard to give you guys an exciting homework like the one I gave you last week. This one's a bit more drudgery because, you know, just it's just exercises. There's nothing super exciting about that. And that's what you're probably getting for this week and next week. And then once we get into linked lists, I promise you it's going to start being really exciting there. So here you're learning how to use lists and dealing with lists and strings. So these are around the difficulty. Some are a bit harder than the questions that would be on the exam at week 5, right? So around the same difficulty as some of as questions that would be similar to this, like, you know, write a method for a list that does blah, right? This is around the difficulty. I've got a lot of footnotes scattered around that are hints, so just be sure to read them. And so big thing is that the answers you write for this week will be used in next week's homework because you'll analyze your code, right? You're going to be doing a big O analysis for your own code for the next homework. Okay. And if you guys manage to like get it knocked out, I might be able to. I think I might post some extra credit work. Or extra credit work for you guys to incentivize you to learn about regular expressions. Okay, so here we're going to be dealing with static generic methods as opposed to generic classes. Right? Generic classes are the classes that use generics. Generic methods are basically methods that use generics. In other words, they take in a list and they're not sure what it's going to have, but they're sure it's going to be all the same type. So suppose we want to write the example I give here, suppose we want to write this method, the public static Boolean in, and I say, okay, this is a method that's going to check, is this item inside this list? Okay? Fairly straightforward idea, right? Return true if list contains the item, false otherwise, right? And I know that the list is going to be holding all the same type, right? So it's going to be either a list of integers or a list of strings or something like that. So I'm going to put E here like you would do if you're writing it. And this is fairly close to correct, but we do get hit with an error. So we put this in, and Java says, hey, it can't resolve the symbol for E, right? So what does that mean? It says that essentially that it doesn't know what it's looking for is a class over here, right? You can use generics and methods perfectly fine, right? If I were to write a method that deals with well, you'll understand what this is very quickly. Public static int sum list of integers, right? Right. This has no problem, and I'm going to just return -1 over here just to quash the error. Right? This has no problems taking in a bunch of integers, right? You said, hey, this is a list, and this method will only accept lists of integers. It won't accept lists of doubles, won't accept lists of shorts, won't accept lists of longs, won't accept lists of strings. It's only going to accept a list of integers. Yes?
If you had a public static double, then would it accept?
It would, if it was public static double, it would just return, it would accept a list of integers, but it would return a double, right? Right, so the return type only affects what gets returned. Okay. Now there are some things we'll learn how to we'll be able to do over here, which you'll see in I think the context for this is like E extends number. But that gets a bit more beyond what I want to do there, right? And then you'd replace it with E over here, but I don't want to. I don't want to get into that, and that would allow you to use any number there, either an int or a double. But again, right now that's skipping a couple chapters ahead. So public static int sum a list of integers. This would basically sum up a list of integers. Here, though, what it does, what your compiler does, is it says, okay, it's a list of what? Oh, it's a list of integers. No problem. I know what an integer is. Here it's saying it's a list of e's. What the heck's an e? Did you write an e class? Why didn't you tell me about that, right? It's looking for an e. it's looking for an E class. There is no E class. It doesn't realize that you want to use it as a generic, right? As the symbol for, it could be a list of all the things of the same type, right? So to do that, and this looks really weird, but you'll get the hang of it, is that you put the generic operator over there. I'm still getting an error, but that's because it's asking me to return something, so I'm just going to return false over here, just to quash the error again. So now it's saying, oh, that E is a symbol, meaning you're using it for generics, right? Now you don't have to use E. You could use T here, so long as you use T's over here, right? T for type, E for element is generally the way it works. Another popular one is K for key and V for value, and because these methods actually can take multiple, like you can put in multiple generics in there if you wanted to, but right now we're just dealing with one. You're not going to need to deal with multiple generics until we get to chapter 7, okay? And then it makes sense there because you're dealing with keys which are one type and values which might be another type, okay? So this is now we don't really know anything about these other than this is a list of items, right? This is a list of items of some type that is shared. And I'm using T here because that's what it ended up being. So to check if it's in there, I can just simply write something like this. For everything in the list, well, what's the type that's stored in the list? It's a T, type T, right? Or E if you put E there. T thing, for each T thing in the list, right? I'm awesome at my vocabulary, right? So for each thing in the list, if thing dot equals the item, return true, right? If we're going through the list looking at one thing at a time and we find the thing and that thing is equal to the item I'm searching for, then it was in the list, so I return true, right? And now I know I can call the dot, so one note here that I'm using the dot equals method, right? Because all objects have a dot equals method, and we are assured that T is an object because only classes can be put in here. And if it's a class, that means it's descended from object somewhere, which means it's got the dot equals method, the dot toString method, the dot hashcode method, so all sorts of things that we would really like. And the dot equals, it will call each of these guys dot equals, and it will call things dot equals and compare it to the item. And so a lot of times to tell if things are the same, you just want to use the dot equals. If we use two equal signs in a row, then you're just comparing memory locations, which may or may not be your intent, right? Memory locations meaning it's the same exact. They're exact. They don't just have the same values. They're the same. Their names referring item and thing are names referring to the same person, right? Or two addresses representing the same physical location, right? A physical location can have a latitude, longitude. It can have a street address, and it can have a colloquial name as well. Okay, so the key here that's for this assignment is knowing, and I have the correct way to do it right here. When do you not want to use it? Well, we use generics when we know everything is going to be the same type, but we don't know what the type's going to be, right? When we don't know what the type is going to be, but we know everything's going to be same type, we use this format. When you do know what the type is going to be, right, there's a lot of questions in this one that deal with list of strings or list of integers, right? Oh, you know it's going to be strings or integers, so I'm just going to put string or integer as need be, right? So public static return type my method takes in a list of integers, right? Here are there are 6 problems. Each problem is worth 15 points. They're all worth the same, even though some are harder than others. No problem there. And you'll want to create a method for each of them. So the first is called uniqueness, which we write a method called unique. It takes in a list. So this is one where you would use the generic. It returns true if all the items are unique. They're unique if none of them are the same. And again, we're checking if things are the same by using the dot equals method. Otherwise, return false. All multiples, this one basically, it's a list of integers and an int, and you create a new list that's composed of all the numbers from the original list that are multiples of that number. It makes more sense with this example. For instance, I pass all these numbers in, and 5, right, passed in this list of number and 5, so I'm going to grab all the multiples of 5, which were 25, 5, 30, and 25. So this is just a reminder that the modulo function exists, right? right? And you should use it. This one's very, if you can do 2 through, you pretty much get number 3 for free. It's very similar. You take in a list of strings and an integer length. You get a new string which consists of all the strings from the original list that are length characters long. So I like to eat apples and bananas. And 3, the new list is eat, and. Okay, an important thing to note, by the way, when you're testing these, is that you can pass in an array list into this function, because an array list is a list. You can pass in an array list of integers into this function, because an array list is a list, right? So it takes in, you can pass in an array list over here, even though it says it takes a list, right? Since an array list is a list, you can pass it into those guys, right? And when you return, and these both return lists, right? But you can create a new array list and then return it. Even though the return type will say a list, you can return an array list, since an array list is a list. Does that make sense? Right? If I have some method over here that says public static list of integers, make me a list, right? It's perfectly fine for me to return a new array list of integers, because an array list is a list of integers. Or array list of integers is a list of integers. Okay? So now so those are 3 easy ones, I would say. These ones are 3 they're slightly more difficult, but not in a particular order. Like, I feel like this one's more difficult than this one, but this one has extra credit attached to it that you can do, which isn't more difficult. It just requires you to go and learn something else. Is permutation. It takes in 2 list objects. They are going to contain the same type. It returns true if they're permutations of each other. They're permutations if they have the same elements, including the same number of duplicates. Okay? But they don't have to contain the elements in the same order. So example, we've got 1, 2, 4 and 2, 1, 4. Those are permutations of each other. But 1, 1, 2, 4 would not be a permutation of either of those because they don't have the same number, right? Because we count the repeats. So this one is a bit tricky about it. You got to be, well, less tricky and more tedious, to be honest. String to list of words. So given a string, turn it into a list of words. Okay? So you're going to assume that it's separated by white space. So our example here is that we've got hello, comma, world, exclamation point. Your output's going to be hello, comma, and then as the first element, and the second element is going to be world. So how do you split up a string into that? I mean, other than like going through it in a very tedious manner, the answer is the split method. You use the split method, and it will give you if you call the split method on a string, so that's an instance method, so you just call it on the string you want to split, and it will break into multiple parts. It will return an array of strings. So, and it takes a special string called a regular expression. It's like a code for a pattern, and split will match anything in the pattern. And once you know the language, like //s+ matches any amount of white space, so you can use that to get started with. That will break it up, and you can use that to break it up along any white space, which is a space, a tab, or a period, or a not period, but a new line. All right. The extra credit here is to sanitize it. So rather than returning hello, comma, and world exclamation point, you'd give me back hello and world. So you can use the replace all method, I believe, or remove all. Yeah, the replace all method in strings to do that. And that's useful if you learn regular expressions. And so that's worth 5 extra credit points there. And finally, this one, which is remove all instances. So given a list and an item, remove each item that matches the given item. So for instance, if I pass you a list of integers 1, 5, 6, 5, 5, 2, and you should definitely test it on this one, and then you pass in 5, it'll remove all 5s from the list. So the list would become 1, 4, 6, 2. Okay? It should return nothing because I gave you a list, you modified the list, you don't need to return a new list, right? It's like when you modify an array, you don't need to return the array. Notice the footnote, it says that this one is tricky because removing an item shifts the index. Okay, there's about there's about 4 different ways students typically come up with a solution. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Neither is more, I'd say one is less correct than the others, but you wouldn't know that one is less correct yet. And you'll learn, and if you do it that way, you'll learn why next week why that one's less correct, but you'll still get credit for it. No problem. Okay, 15 points for each. 5 points for 5 of those 15 points for each of them is using the generics. 10 points for making sure your code is neat and properly indented. If you have Eclipse, it's a matter of pressing Control A and Control I. If you've got NetBeans or similar, it's a matter of going and basically finding how you can do the auto formatting for your code. I think I need Alt Insert over here. No. Control A, Control I. No implement methods have been found. I'm not sure how to do it in NetBeans. Sorry, not NetBeans, but in NetBeans, you right click and hit Format. Code. Yeah, auto format, reformat code. And then it just simply lines it up automatically for you. So there's no excuse for having a messy code because your IDE will be able to do it for you. All right. To demo it, you come to me you show me that you have all 6 problems done, and I will ask you to solve remove all. You showed it to the TA, and we'll ask you how to explain how you solve remove all instances. Verify that it works on the test cases. So you're gonna demo this one, and then we choose one of the other 5 for you to demo, and it just happens to be like whatever we feel like, essentially. So we're not gonna ask everybody to demo the same one. If you do something interesting on one of them that we haven't seen before, we'll ask you to explain it. No problem there. So this one's fairly straightforward. All right. So